Welcome to the School Garden Support Organization Networks webinar on bringing social emotional learning and mindfulness education to your work. I'm going to start out here by sharing my screen, and we'll let attendees file in as I'm sharing my screen. All right, I'm going to make this full screen for you. So my name is John Fisher, and I'm one of the co-founders and on the advisory committee of the School Garden Support Organization Networks Advisory Committee. And today we're going to be talking about bringing social emotional learning and mindfulness education to your work. Onward. So we will be sharing a recording of this presentation in a follow-up email. I'll also be posting a copy of the presentation and the resources on our website at sgso-network.org/webinars, and I'll also be adding it to the chat a few minutes into our presentation. We will have time at the end for questions, and we have collated some of your questions, and we're going to spend some time on a group note-taking document. Share your questions through the chat feature, not the Q&A feature. So use the chat in our Zoom, and we will summarize some of those questions at the end. And at the end of the presentation, you will be directed to share your feedback on how this presentation went through a Google form, and we'd appreciate your feedback. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to start out with a little bit of introduction about who our network is, a little bit about who registered for the event, and then Sunny Wight, co-founder and executive director of Mindfulness First, and Sheri Dollin, a mindfulness trainer and education consultant, both from the Phoenix area, are going to be sharing the content today around social emotional learning and mindfulness education. Together they have maybe over a half a century of experience doing this work. And then we'll go to Q&A, and as I mentioned before, the feedback surveys for you to do on your own. So the School Garden Support Organization Network creates peer-to-peer learning opportunities among school garden support organizations. And our goal is to create a dialogue. And we do that through webinars, in-person gatherings back in the day, and we will again, and some great web resources. Currently, we are running a full-on webinar and virtual gathering schedule. We have one every single week at sgso-network.org/webinar, which is listed there on the slide. You can see what we have archived and what's coming up. And I also put in the box a webinar that we did in March of 2020 on trauma-informed education and horticultural therapy. So I know some of you are tuning in for similar content area. And so if you go to our website, you can access that slide deck and resources on those topics. Our webinar and virtual gathering series is brought to you through underwriting support and financial support from the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation. And the other organizations that are listed here have been helping to pull together the content and run some of our sessions. If you go to our website, there are two ways to connect with us digitally. One is our forum, and we have particular threads and discussion areas related to COVID, which is a really big topic these days. We also have an email list that you can get to from our Connect page, and that's where you'll hear about upcoming events and webinars. We've created a COVID-19 resources page, which we've been taking resources shared by other SGSOs, and we share them all in one place. So you can find ideas on distance teaching and how we're accessing gardens, and links to our virtual gatherings and other resources related to teaching outdoors during COVID-19 or teaching distantly during COVID-19. So a little bit about who registered. We had about 390 folks register, and this is what you had to say about the status of your work right now. The large majority of you are all distance teaching right now. About half of you are a mix of distance and in-person. Many of you are still, you just don't know, and that's what this time is about, is learning and adapting. And some of you, a small percentage of you, are all back with live instruction. So just wanted to kind of set the framework of where we're coming from in terms of an audience. And related to our topic today, we asked our registrants, if they've ever taken a mindfulness or social emotional learning training, and the large majority of you have not, and great, congratulations on being here, because you'll find out where to get more information, and this essentially is a training as well. And a smaller percentage of you have, 12% have participated in a training, and some of you are brand new to this, and that's why you're here. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Sunny and Sheri, and they are going to share their screen as I stop sharing my screen.
Hi, welcome. We're going to begin with just a little just settling in. Sunny, I'll wait for you to get set up there. So this is us.
You can see the screen, yes?
Yes, yeah. And we're going to start with what we call a mindful moment, just to help us settle in and get focused. And so I'm just going to guide you for a brief moment in time here. So I'd like for you to sit in a comfortable position, allow both soles of your feet to connect to the floor, and rest your hands on your thighs, or let your shoulders drop, just to be in a comfortable position. Gently close your eyes, or look for a reference point somewhere on the floor where you can return your eyes when they get distracted. And let your spine grow tall and noble like the trunk of a tall tree. Take a moment to notice how your body feels as you bring your attention to the flow of your breath. You don't need to breathe in a special way. Your body knows how to breathe. Just simply notice each breath coming into the body with an in-breath and leaving the body with an out-breath. And if you notice your mind is caught up in thoughts, concerns, emotions, or body sensations, know that this is normal. Notice what is distracting you and gently let it go without judgment by redirecting your attention back to the breath. Keep escorting your attention back to the experience of breathing. Allow each breath to be a new beginning and each out-breath to be a letting go. Slowly bring your attention back to your surroundings and let how you feel now guide you. And when you're done, you can just check in with yourself and just think about how you feel in this moment as we begin our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheri, for that lovely mindful moment. I'd invite everybody to notice how you feel right now after spending some time quietly noticing your breathing. It's important for the rest of the presentation to have an understanding of what happens when we spend time in a mindful moment and the benefits of that. We're going to explain the biology behind the benefits of doing exactly what Sheri just led us through. And we're going to help you to be able to bring mindful moments and social emotional learning to the children, both in your virtual classrooms and then in your live classrooms when we're all back in school again. So here's a quick rundown of what to expect in this presentation. We're going to start by asking the question, why? Why do we teach mindfulness and social emotional learning? Then we're going to talk about what is MBSEL. MBSEL stands for Mindfulness-Based Social Emotional Learning. And we're going to break it down into three pillars that are trauma, mindfulness, and social emotional learning. And we're going to have a quick lesson in what those three things are. and how they create strong, mentally healthy classrooms and schools. Then we'll talk about teaching mindfulness-based social emotional learning in the virtual setting. And we'll do some exercises together that you can then go ahead and do with your students. And we have provided an extensive resource list with links to other people doing practices so that you can practice it yourself at home and then deliver it to the children in your classrooms. And we're going to end with some questions and answers as well. So let's get going with our lesson on foundational mindfulness-based social emotional learning. Sometimes I call this the human user manual. You know, for a long time, the work that we do, I work for a nonprofit called Mindfulness First, and we teach trauma, mindfulness, and social emotional learning to teachers, to K-12 teachers, and then we also provide the curriculum and resources needed for those teachers to then teach it to children. And we also teach children as well, but we focus on the teachers. Teachers are our priority. And for a long time, we noticed that people referred to the kind of work that we did as a soft skill, because we teach you how to relax. We teach you about generosity, about kindness, and these for a long time have been perceived as soft skills. But what the science is showing us now is that these are foundational life skills. And in fact, I would argue they're the missing piece in education. Why do we teach mindfulness and social emotional learning? Well, over 100 years ago, we mandated physical education, but mental health education has been the missing piece all along, as I just called it, the missing piece in education. And its absence is so starkly obvious to us if we just look at mental health statistics. And we can look at the mental health statistics around children, which are incredibly alarming at this moment around depression and anxiety. And yes, we do have an issue right now because of the pandemic, but long before the pandemic, we were experiencing a mental health crisis in our youth as it was. And not to mention our youth, our adults, 1 in 4 adults in the United States will experience a diagnosable mental illness in any given year. So this makes us want to ask the question why, and what are we not doing? What are we not helping people with? And I would argue that in schools, we should be teaching mental health literacy and mental health life skills. And that is what mindfulness and social emotional learning is all about. And that's why I know you've been asked to teach social emotional learning to your children, to your students, because right now, in these unusual times, we need mental health support more than ever. So the good news is that mindfulness has been researched since 1972 and social emotional learning since 1994. So we have so much data showing us that these areas of knowledge, these life skills are vital and impactful, and the data just really is compelling. And I can tell you, as someone who works in schools with teachers all the time with mindfulness and social emotional learning that is trauma sensitive, our experience is incredibly consistent. We see all kinds of results that are the same across the board. Bullying decreases, both in children and adults. Grades increase, suspensions dramatically increase. We see up to 93% reduction in suspensions in the schools we work in. All the good stuff comes that you're looking for in the schools when we ground the school in prioritizing mental health wellness. So thank you for being here today to learn more about this. It is really something that is proven to be very important. Okay, so here's our lesson. We're going to look at the 3 pillars of our human user manual. And these 3 pillars are trauma, mindfulness, and social emotional learning. So you've been asked to teach social emotional learning, but we cannot teach social emotional learning without an understanding of mindfulness. And let me explain why. Social emotional learning is how we bring ourselves to our experience of the rest of the world. It's how we relate to the world. It's how we have relationships, how we make good decisions, how we have self-awareness in social situations. for us to be able to do that, we need to understand what's happening inside of our body all the time. And what I'm talking about is your emotions, feelings, thoughts, physical and mental impulses, your senses. We need to understand those. And so there is no social emotional learning without an understanding of mindfulness. And if we're going to go in the body and start doing mindfulness, start looking at emotions and feelings, we're going to need to know about trauma. And that's because trauma is stored in the body. Trauma is what has happened to us. It's our programming. I'm going to explain it more to you in a moment. But trauma sensitivity is vital when we're learning about mindfulness. So these three pillars hold up the table of strong, good mental health. So there's no social emotional learning without mindfulness, and there's neither without trauma sensitivity. Let's dig deeper into that idea. So John has a copy of this picture if you would like to print it out for your classroom or to share it with your kids in your Zoom room. But this is the poster we give to all the kids, even the preschool kids that we work with, all the teachers that we work with. When we're understanding mental health, our first port of call is understanding the stress reaction. So let's learn about the stress reaction. This is something you can teach to your students in your Zoom room. You can teach this online. And it's so empowering. Once we know what happens biologically when we're stressed out, we suddenly realize that we are actually in charge and we can regulate what's happening. So look at the little red dot in the middle of this poster. That is the amygdala. It's the most primitive part of our brain. And it was designed to keep us alive way back when the world was way more primitive and life was more precarious and we might be in danger at any given moment. And when I say in danger, I mean our lives might be in danger. Here in the modern world, our amygdala is still working, but it's picking up on dangers that are things like being stuck in traffic, your kids driving you bonkers, you're arguing with your mother-in-law, you read an awful email, you're on social media. It could be anything. And what happens is our senses perceive something on the outside that's negative, right? And it comes into the body and it shoots straight up to the amygdala. And the amygdala goes, uh-oh, something is going on outside of our body that might be putting us in danger. We need to stay safe. Sometimes I call this the safety reaction, so the stress reaction, because it's all about safety. So the amygdala sets off a chain of reactions. Step one, it shuts off access to that green part there, the prefrontal cortex, which is where we make all of our smart decisions. When we're talking about it with the kids, we call it the wise owl. We use a wise owl puppet. It's very cute. And then we also call the amygdala the guard dog, and we show it barking and sounding the alarm and saying there's danger. The amygdala shuts off access to our smarts, our smart part of our brain. So, and this is because if you need to save your life, you don't have time to be making smart decisions. You've got to make basic decisions to fight, flight, or freeze, right? So that's step one. And I want you to keep in mind, kids who are stressed out in the classroom don't have access to the smart part of their brain, right? They're not, if they're stressed, they're not using all of their capacity. So that's why stress relief in the classroom is really important. And we'll learn more about those mindful moments to help relieve the stress in a little while. The amygdala also sends emergency hormones around the body. It sends your blood supply to your extremities so you can fight, flight, or freeze, right? So think about when you're super stressed and those aches and pains you get in your shoulders. That's what's going on. And as a result of all that, it cuts off blood supply to your stomach because there's no time to digest food if you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, right? So if you are one of those people who gets a funny tummy when you're stressed out, that's why. And here's the final part, which is the most serious part. Our immune system becomes suspended when we're in fight, flight, freeze, when we're stressed out. And that's why stress is a killer. And that's why so many people have stress-induced illnesses. And I'm one of those people. I experienced about 10 years ago a stress-induced breakdown. And because I was, because my immune system was suppressed so much from being stressed out, the chickenpox virus that lived in me since I was a child was able to activate and gave me shingles like a 90-year-old. And I feel lucky that it wasn't more serious than that. But that's a really good example of why stress is not only problematic for our brain and our focus, but it's also not good for our health. So when we experience stressful events, when we experience repeated stressful events, something happens in the brain. And I want you to remember, it's not what happens to us, but it's how this particular body reacts. But it creates something called trauma. Now, a trauma is a huge, unresolved, unprocessed, huge emotion that causes an adaptation in how we behave. And I'm going to make this really simple for you. Let's imagine you're a kid, you go to the park and you get bitten by a dog. That's going to change your behaviors, right? That's a trauma that changes your behaviors. You may not, depending on who you are, you may no longer like dogs. You might have problems in all sorts of environments where a dog may be present. You may never want to go to the park again. Do you see where I'm going? It's a huge unprocessed emotion that changes how we behave. Now, traumas can happen in all sorts of settings. It could be all sorts of things that happen, but if stress happens time and time again, like it did to me, if you have lots and lots of stress, it becomes toxic stress. And when stress acts as a toxin on the brain, it changes the architecture of our brain and mental health issues begin. So this is why it's really important that we understand trauma if we're going to be helping ourselves and our students to have strong, healthy, a good mental health. How do we prevent trauma? Well, the science is conclusive. There are so many scientific studies, and a lot of them are around ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. That's the scientific name for a trauma that happens when you're a kid and basically programs you for the rest of your life. There's a lot of science that has come up with these protective factors that can help to break the cycle of trauma and help us to prevent and manage trauma. Now, when you and me learn trauma, mindfulness, and social emotional learning, and we bring it to ourselves and then to our students, we bring the protective factors. It starts with being one caring adult. The science shows us that if one caring adult can support a child, it can help to break the cycle of trauma. That caring adult who is trained in mindfulness and social emotional learning can help co-regulate with children and bring them social emotional competence, a very important protective factor. Teachers, you have a lot of knowledge around parenting and child rearing. You have a lot of knowledge around nurturing and healthy attachment. These are also really important protective factors. And social connections, here's the social emotional learning. This is a protective factor. All of the above create resilience for children and for us. And so when we learn all of this and we bring it to the students we work with, we bring we create a trauma-sensitive classroom that has strong mental health. Okay, so that was trauma. Now we're going to move on to the second pillar. We're going to talk about mindfulness. So mindfulness is how we regulate and prevent stress, okay? So the stress causes the trauma, but we can regulate and prevent stress by using the amazing life skills and the easy life skills of mindfulness. Mindfulness, put simply, is noticing what's happening inside and outside your body right now. So the breath work that Sheri taught us earlier is a way for us to regulate the amygdala. So when we breathe deeply, we send a message to our brain. Instead of sending a message that something negative is going on, we send a message to our brain that everything's okay, and the amygdala can relax, give us access to our prefrontal cortex, prevent us from being in fight, flight, freeze, and we can make good decisions, and we can be in a good place, okay? So that breath work, number one, helps to regulate stress. Number two, this is the powerful part of mindfulness. Once we've learned this breath work, we can spend time in a relaxed state, examining everything that happens on the inside of our body, things like our thoughts, feelings, emotions, senses, physical and mental impulses. And when we spend time repeatedly examining these things, we get to know them so well, we get to know ourselves so well, we sit firmly in the driver's seat of our biology and become fully able to regulate and manage what's happening inside of our body. And here's how it works. So let's imagine you're in a confrontational situation. This finger is the confrontational situation. This finger is what you choose to do in that confrontational situation. Well, if we insert your mindfulness practice, your trauma-sensitive mindfulness practice into the middle of what is happening and what you choose to do, there is a pause. There is a space where you can make a good decision with access to all of your brain and access to all of your knowledge of how your inner workings work, right? And you make a good decision. You can choose to react, to respond rather than react. Now, a little disclaimer from me and Sheri. We want to make sure that you know that your mindfulness practice is key to the success of bringing mindfulness to the classroom. And we're going to give you lots of ideas of how you can, we're going to give you some practices that you can do yourself. And then once you've practiced them yourself, then you can bring them to the children. But please remember that just as with mathematics or with grammar, it's what we know that teaches the children the subject. So mindfulness leads us to strong social emotional skills. So let's tie the mindfulness into social emotional learning. So once we know about ourselves, once we know what's happening on the inside, we can then apply it to our experience with the rest of the world. Mindfulness helps us to regulate the stress reaction, prevent and manage trauma, think critically, have deep compassion and empathy for others. Remember I said mindfulness helps prevent bullying. It helps the bully and the bullied. It helps us to make really good decisions. It's powerful. And think about what a powerful effect this could have on society in general if we made this our foundational part of education, if we prioritized mental health well-being in education. I just wanted to share the social emotional learning wheel with you. This is from CASEL.org, CASEL.org. They are the originators of the SEL concept. And these are the core competencies of social emotional learning. And as you can see and appreciate, an understanding of trauma and mindfulness is important when we're talking about, say, self-management up here in the left-hand corner, self-awareness on the right-hand corner, right? Social awareness. We need to understand what's going on inside of us, and that involves trauma and mindfulness understandings. So the equation, trauma-informed plus mindfulness plus social emotional learning, brings the protective factors to help you and me and our students have strong mental health skills, self-regulation, and really good feelings of safety, which is a wonderful thing to be able to create. And we can create that feeling of safety in our Zoom rooms. It's possible. And there, one last word, the human user manual. Remember, this is what we call the human user manual, and it's not soft skills. So let's talk about how we can bring this to the kids. So here at Mindfulness First, we've been around for about 7 years, and we used to go into the schools to work on the ground all the time with our teachers, but it wasn't always convenient. So in 2018, we pivoted and went totally online, and we provide all of our trainings now to train our teachers in trauma, mindfulness, and social emotional learning online. So we've become really adept at bringing online trainings to people. So this year wasn't a shock for us. We were ready to go. Nothing changed for us really. But just like you, we had the new experience of bringing mindfulness to kids online. We'd made some asynchronous sessions before, but we'd never gone live before. And so I want to report back to you about how that's gone. And one really good example is this party we had with Lululemon in the summer. It was about an hour long. We had about 60 kids online, which I was like, I don't even know how we're going to manage 60 kids online, but we did. These kids were incredible. We did mindful eating, mindful art, which we're going to do today, you and me. We did mindful movement, so we got up out of our seats, we did stretching, and we stretched out the stress. it went really, really well. And the reason was because the kids had already been well trained by their teachers. It had become normal at that point to be learning online. They are so skilled with technology that it just was second nature for them. And we had a lot of fun. And what they really liked about this was the interactive nature of doing mindfulness together online. It was really, really successful. The mindful movement was really good. I totally recommend doing that. Just remember to practice before you do it, pushing away from the table so that, and noticing on the screen if you can see your whole body, if you're going to do some mindful movement. I'm sure many of you have done online yoga classes since the pandemic began, and you've seen for yourself how successful it can be. And of course, mindful eating is really fun. We did it at lunchtime. So everybody they packed up a lunch and they brought it in, and we spent time noticing all of our senses while we ate our food. And then we'd let the kids raise their hands and tell us how they felt. We'd go around in a circle, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. I just wanted to give you one case study there. And then asynchronous. This is something we've done quite a bit of. So we'll just take our iPhones and we'll film ourselves, or ourselves with our kids, if we've got a kid at home, practicing one mindfulness or mindfulness-based social emotional learning technique that can then be sent out to either the students at the schools we work in, or we can put it on social media and that kind of stuff. We don't make very long sessions, but they're super helpful and bite-sized, right? So in our resource ideas today, we have ideas that you could copy and use for asynchronous experiences for your students moving forward. But when we're talking about delivering mindfulness and social emotional learning through online learning, through distance learning, something I want to stress to you is something that we hold dear at Mindfulness First every time we work with anyone. Relationships and genuine connection are everything, because that's what this is about. We're talking about mental health wellness, and we are, as humans, we are wired to be connected, and the connection is so important to our mental health, and our strong relationships are so important to our mental health. And I want to build on that a little bit. So, for example, if we're going into a school and teaching a curriculum to a classroom, we always know that maybe today it won't be possible to teach the lesson we're coming to teach because the kids might need to talk, they might be somewhere else, we don't know what they're bringing to the classroom today, and sometimes we just toss the curriculum out the window and we have circle time, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. Like we'll go through the circle and we'll let people be heard and build those social emotional skills of listening, mindful listening, compassion, understanding, all of us seeing that we're all the same and we experience the same challenges. And so as you bring social emotional learning, and we know that for many people on this call, this is brand new to you, think about how relationships and genuine connection are everything. You don't have to be a therapist to be therapeutic. You just need to be human and relatable to the children in your classroom. We'll build on that some more now. So something that Sheri and I talk about is embedding mindfulness and social emotional learning into what you do. And that comes from your knowledge. So what happens is it doesn't have to be about curriculum. It's what you've learned yourself in terms of mindfulness. What do you understand? What works for you? What social emotional skills do you have? Sometimes that can just appear in the lesson and be taught organically as part of the lesson. And so the ultimate goal when you're learning about these three pillars of mindfulness-based social emotional learning and strong mental health is for it to become embedded into your lessons. Safety is everything, right? We learned about trauma today. We learned about stress reaction, the safety reaction. Safety is everything. So something we do in our live classrooms, which I highly recommend you do in your Zoom rooms, is to communicate and agree that the Zoom room is a safe space for feelings. And you can do this by creating an agreement that everybody gives a thumbs up to, and you could share it on your screen. And the agreement's basically going to say that we're going to be mindful listeners, We're going to, whatever is said in this room stays in this room, and we're going to be respectful of our friends. And so generate that feeling of safety. That makes it trauma sensitive. So mindful moments. This is a great way to reset, start lessons, end lessons, transition from different lessons or different activities. I imagine you using this out in the garden when you're doing gardening lessons, when we're back out there and we're off the online setting. Mindful moments are so fun. There's so many different ways to do it with kids. You can use pinwheels. You can use all kinds of different sounds, roller coasters. There's lots of different ideas. We put them all into our resource list for you. But resetting is really good. And I know from the answers to the questions that we got that a lot of you actually do that already. So good for you. Once you've learned MBSEL practices yourself, then share what you've learned with the students. We've already talked about that. Circles and check-ins. That was also mentioned on the feedback forms when you guys signed up for this class. I know that a lot of you know about circle work. Circle work is phenomenal for mindfulness and social emotional learning. That's where we build those relationships. It's a great place to practice mindfulness together. It's a great way to check in. We do it online all the time. So whoever is facilitating the meeting facilitates the circle, and we can go from square, well, rectangle to rectangle to rectangle, sharing and checking in. It's not difficult. It can be done just like we would do it in person. So it's a safe and great way to share. Other ways to build community, maybe you can have a small group lunch in a Zoom room just to get to know a couple of kids, or a couple of kids who might need extra support. Have a spirit day. I'm sure you've thought of that. Gratitude journal. Gratitude's a huge part of mindfulness. Acts of kindness as well. You can talk about doing acts of kindness together. So there's different ways to build your mindfulness and social emotional learning online just as much as in person. So as this new subject starts to build for you, this is, so we have a curriculum at Mindfulness First, and this is what it looks like. These are the themes. So I wanted to share this with you. You'll get a copy of these slides so you can look at this list of subjects that we study to understand ourselves through mindfulness and understand how to relate to the rest of the world. And these are all, every single one of these subjects is important. Some are easier than others to implement, like mindful eating and mindful art. Mindful senses is fun too. Again, there's some examples in your resources sheet for activities to do. Okay, so let's do an activity together. So let's practice something that you can do tomorrow with the kids in your Zoom room. So we're going to start with mindful art, which is just my favorite. And you do not have to be an artist. You just have to be willing to try. So if I could ask you to please grab your piece of paper. Hopefully you brought a piece of paper and a pen. I would like you to please put your piece of paper in front of you and put your pen to the side, right or left, depending on what hand you use, right or left-handed. And what we're going to do is we're going to draw a flower if you wish, or something else from the garden that you might like, maybe a tree. And we're going to do it either with our eyes closed if we're comfortable closing our eyes, or we're going to do it just looking ahead. So if you're not comfortable closing your eyes, that's totally fine. You can look ahead at a point, like Sheri mentioned earlier when she was doing the mindful moment, just focus on something in the front. But we're going to start by picking up our pen and not looking at our paper. So I'm sorry about my cat. I'm going to let her out in a moment. I'm going to invite you to firstly take a seat and have a deep breath, breathing in and out. Another nice long deep breath in and out. And if you wish to close your eyes, now is the time. Or look ahead at a point ahead of you, don't look at the paper, and then gently and carefully reach, using your hand, reach for your pen. And with both of your hands, I want to invite you to feel your pen or crayon And notice the sensations on your fingertips as you feel it. If there's a lid on your pen, maybe you'll listen to it as it pops off. It's a cool sound. And if your pen, or if you have a crayon even, if you want to smell the odor, we're using all of our senses to be very present as we do mindful art. And the crayons are great for this, okay? And now, not looking at your paper, either with your eyes closed or looking straight ahead, I want to invite you to draw a flower or a tree or something from the garden that brings you joy. Just go ahead with no judgment, no worries of how it might look like. We're not going to judge this because mindfulness is about no judgment. Just draw and be curious about how it might end up looking. Maybe you'll draw, I'm going to draw a butterfly near my flower. Now, if you have other colors, you can also bring them in if you can pick those up. For the kids, you can invite them to have lots of different crayons. Listening to the sound of the pen or the crayon on the paper, feeling how it feels. Be very present with this experience. Just keep going until you feel done. I'm done, so I'm going to put my lid back on my pen. Put it to the side. Aww. So with no judgment at all, we're curious about our picture, and we're interested to see what we did when we just used all of our senses except for our vision. How did we make some art? And then maybe if you're doing this with the kids, then maybe we can spend time coloring together, and we can share the experience. We can go round in a circle and share how was that experience for you as you did your mindful art. So hopefully you can try that one with the kids this week. We have one more experience for you today. Sheri's going to do some mindful listening. Over to you, Sheri.
So much of mindfulness is about being attuned, right? And that enhances the quality of our interactions with people and the environment. And so we thought we selected this mindful listening activity just to kind of walk you through and give you a taste of this is mindfulness practice. As there are many mindfulness practices, this is just one that helps build your intention. So again, I'm going to start with sitting in a comfortable position and allowing both soles of your feet to connect to the floor. Rest your hands on your thigh and let your shoulders drop. Gently closing your eyes, or look for a reference point where you can return your eyes when they get distracted or begin to wander around the room. And let your spine grow tall and noble like the trunk of a tall tree. And take a moment to notice how your body feels. No sensation is right or wrong. The intention is to simply notice how the body feels right here, right now. Now bring your attention to the flow of your breath. You don't need to breathe in a special way. Your body knows how to breathe. Simply notice each breath coming into the body as you inhale and leaving the body as you exhale. If you notice your mind is caught up in thoughts, concerns, emotions, or body sensations, know that this is normal. Notice what is distracting you and gently let it go by redirecting your attention back to the breath. Direct your attention to the experience of hearing, Allow sounds to come and go, just like the breath comes and goes. Stretch your listening out to the farthest sounds you can hear. Notice what is distracting you as you gently let it go. And listen to the sounds in the distance. Notice the sounds as they appear, linger, and vanish. Gradually begin to focus on more immediate sounds. Notice the sounds around you and just listen and experience them as they appear, linger, and vanish. Let the sound you hear be the anchor to the present moment. When you get distracted, notice what distracted you, and as kindly as you can, turn your attention back to the experience of listening. Bring your attention to the sound of your own breath. Continue to breathe for a few moments, letting the breath come and go as it will. Notice each breath coming into the body as you inhale and leaving the body as you exhale. Let each in-breath be a new beginning and each out-breath be a letting go. And slowly bring your attention back to the space. Checking in with yourself and how you feel in this very moment. Just think of one word that would describe how you feel. I want to share that with these mindful practices, because of time, we're doing them in a very kind of short fashion, but you can allow more time, and you can even insert certain readings or quotes, thoughts, and also allowing children or individuals to just pass if they're not comfortable. When you do your circle, you do your check-in, giving people the option to pass or to speak out loud and to share. But this is just a taste, so thank you.
Thank you, Sheri. That is such good advice. Thank you so much. Yes, good point. If you're in a circle, I love that. Yes, not everybody has to feel mandated to share, especially when we're talking about big emotions. I didn't realize quite how loud my air conditioner was until then, Sheri. That was loud. So we can do mindfulness of all the senses. I love that. Mindful listening is great, and you'd be amazed how quiet the kids get with that one. But you can do all the senses too. So starting with a mindful moment, this is what we're going to leave you with. So begin your journey in mindfulness-based social emotional learning by learning how to provide a mindful moment. You can get a really nice little chime from Woodstock Chimes. It's available online, I think maybe $10. I also have this beautiful chime here that's a musical instrument. So you could also use a musical instrument as well, something to make a noise that can be helpful with mindful moments. So it can be incorporated in mindful listening. We can invite children to listen to the beginning, the middle, the end of that bell sound, and it helps them to focus in. We've provided lots and lots of examples of how to lead a fun and different mindful moment for kids in our resource sheet. So please check it out. Use it for beginnings, endings, and transitions, but please never use it for discipline. There might be a moment where everybody's struggling, either in the classroom or here online. You know, we know sometimes the Zoom rooms can get a little bit noisy. So what we can say to children is, oh, I can see that we might need to take a mindful moment. What do you guys think? But never impose it as a discipline method. It's always a resource for resetting.
I just want to add here too, is that it's not that you have to have the tone for a mindful moment, because the thing is about mindfulness and in teaching children or any person is that it gives people a strategy. It's a tool for your toolbox. So it can blend well with any other strategies that people utilize for self-management or to navigate difficult situations. It doesn't make the problems go away. It gives you space and strategies to navigate the landscape. But the thing that children and people can understand is that as long as you have your breath, you can practice this anywhere. And if you don't have your breath, you don't need it anyway, because you're dead. So you always have your breath, and that's why. So you could be anywhere. You could be on an airplane or in a car, and you have in a child, or there could be some kind of stress-related situation, and a child can use their breath wherever they are. So at home, if they're in a difficult situation and they start to feel the triggers in their body of feeling stressed or uncomfortable, they can just use their breathing.
So true. It's with us all the time, and the handy fact is that it actually helps to regulate our nervous system and our amygdala. So it's just the best thing.
Sometimes I'm at a red light and I just give myself a quick countdown, a mindful moment where I'm safe. But it's like so I just use my breath to read.
I love that, Sheri. Mindfulness while you're waiting.
Yes.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great policy to have. When we were waiting in line at the DMV the other day, and my daughter said to me, "What should I do?" I said, "Just do mindfulness while waiting," because it was such a long wait. So mindfulness grows from the foundation of the mindful moment, for understanding that mindful breathing and the power of the mindful breathing. It can be a curriculum, but it's also a culture and an environment. At Mindfulness First, we have mindful schools. We're working on a mindful district. It becomes a way of life. Once adults understand it, they model it, and then they co-regulate with kids and they pass it on to the kids. And a restorative culture is organically created from self-understanding and empathy. It just happens. It's so much compassion and empathy is created through mindfulness understanding that we move away from punishment to how can we help a child who's struggling. We've seen this at one of our schools. The year we started, suspensions were 45. 3 years later, they were 3. There was 3 suspensions, and all kids were a success story. But that's a whole bigger story, but I've seen it done with my own eyes. So as we mentioned earlier, lots of fun ways to do mindful breathing. Sheri's totally right. You don't need a chime. You can use a chime if you want to. It's another fun addition. You can make glitter jars. We've given you the recipe for glitter jars, breathing buddies, lots and lots of ideas. It's all in your resources. And homework for you, a good place to start is Headspace, because they're free for educators. Educators, staff, administrators all get Headspace for free. So go to headspace.com/educators and start your mindful moments today. It's really easy, great resources on headspace.com. And then if you need more resources, just check out our resource list that we've provided. And we'll open the floor up for questions. Thank you, John.
All right, so I'm coming back here. Thank you, Sunny and Sheri. That was great, from understanding the underpinnings of how our brains work to how this could look with kids. I invite folks to check out the resources that Sunny and Sheri shared. I'm going to share that again right now in the chat, and then direct you to how we're going to do our solution solving or our Q&A. So I'm going to take over sharing the screen and direct you to how we're going to do this. All right, so you all shared many questions throughout the registration process. And what we've done is we put them on a Padlet. So if you can go to Padlet, I'll put this in the chat as well, padlet.com/garden-director/SEL. Bear with me as I add that. So if you go to that Padlet, this is a group communication tool or note-taking tool. And there's two ways to work within the Padlet. So the link, if I spelled it correctly, which I did, is in the chat. So jump on over to the Padlet, and I'm going to jump over to the Padlet shortly. But when you get in the Padlet, you can either log in or you can sign off on your contributions if you want to contribute anonymous. And what I mean by that, I'm sharing on my screen right now, you would just contribute your answer and put in your name, where you're from, and your organization. So I'm going to switch my share and I'm going to open up the Padlet. So once again, in the chat, padlet.com/garden-director/SEL is where you can access the Padlet. And now I'm going to share my Padlet screen with you all. So what I did, you all generated many questions through the registration process, and many of them were similar or redundant. And what we've done is categorize them into these 8 different question areas. And what we want to do at this time is use this as a solution sharing session. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes to browse through these headers, tips of bringing mindfulness to garden-based learning, different examples of working with different age group people. How do you do this if you're just visiting very infrequently as an outsider or a guest instructor? Another question was, where do you find training in mindfulness and social emotional learning? And I already put a link to Sunny and Sheri's resources, which share some places. How do you connect and show empathy when your faces are covered? So if you're on a screen, that's different. But if you are getting to the point of being face-to-face with your kids and you can't smile at them, any suggestions on how to make that work better so you can be more empathetic or share emotion? How do you hold space right now to discuss the emotional impacts of this pandemic we're a part of? How do we assess this work? You know, we're on a screen possibly sharing these resources with kids and breathing practices. And then how do we know, is this working? Is it coming through to our kids? And then another question that was shared in the chat, we're sharing examples of how this is being done on a district-wide level. So we invite you now for about 5 minutes to, if you have solutions, click the little plus button below each column and you can start sharing ideas. And in about 5 minutes, we're going to come back on and we're going to have Sheri and Sunny address some of these topics. And if we have time, we have other questions that were shared in the chat that we will jump on as well and share those out. So you've got 5 minutes to yourself starting now. So we have about 2 more minutes, and thank you all who are contributing solutions and ideas. There's some great resources being shared here. And Sunny and Sheri, I just want to let you know that I chatted to you a list of questions that some folks had, some more particular questions that we might get time to address as well in the next 15 minutes that we have left.
Can I jump in?
Sheri, do you have a response to some of those participants?
I do, and I'm going to call on my partner here, Sunny, to help.
Reiterate the question. So these are questions that some of you put in chat, and I pass them on to Sheri and Sunny. So we'll start with some of these participated generated questions. The solutions shared on the Padlet are open for everybody to take a look at. So Sheri, restate the question.
So SEL can be used to teach students that the trauma they're experiencing in school should be tolerated by pushing them towards mindfulness, or silence instead of allowing them to express their grievances with our flawed education systems. How do we ensure that as educators, we aren't perpetuating this? So this is a loaded question. And I'm just gonna touch on this because I am not a trauma expert. But I just want to say that when you are implementing mindfulness, that to be mindful of children, some people that are experiencing trauma, this could be a trigger. So you want to collaborate with other people or other professionals that are familiar with the child or yourself, but just knowing that you have to be a little careful in those moments. And I'm going to let Sunny elaborate on that.
Yes, safety is everything. When we're teaching about, so today was just a snapshot into what this subject area. And if we're going to bring this into schools on a wider level, safety has to come first, and it's no overnight solution. It's no overnight implementation. We're talking about systemic change within the school, and so this question around safety is so important in making sure that children are able to express themselves. But I just want to say that from my experience of doing this, this is an excellent question. And the question, there's a follow-up question below it about social emotional learning being used to silence the expression of Black and Indigenous people of color as well. These are really important questions, and what we need to know is this is why social emotional learning cannot be without mindfulness, and neither cannot be without trauma. The trauma understanding helps us to understand and address the issues around trauma, but the mindfulness helps us to implement trauma-informed mindfulness, helps us to ensure that everybody is a critical thinker. We're not coming in this to tell people how to think, how to be, and to be quiet and not express their feelings. It's completely the opposite. We are in this to help people express their feelings, and to Sheri's point, it is absolutely vital. The school psychologist and the counselors are an integral part of any systemic change involving mindfulness, trauma, and social emotional learning. It is complicated, and safety has to be the #1 port of call.
My focus with mindfulness comes more through the lens of disabilities, and I work with adults with autism, and utilizing mindfulness as a strategy for self-management. And So there's a lot, we didn't, as Sunny said, this is just a snapshot, but there's a lot that has to do with judgment and also just cultivating your awareness. And so the curriculum that I utilize, which is from Mindfulness Without Borders, is what's nice is that when you do it as a group in a classroom, it erases the judgment. So everybody's they're on an even playing field. So you set up guidelines about creating a safe space when you're implementing a lesson, and people can pass, but anybody, so you could, it's going around the circle. We use a talking stick or whatever is motivating. So I worked with one man who liked little squiggly, cushy things. So we use those kind of characters as the talking stick. So whatever is motivating to the group, and therefore they get to pass it around and everybody gets a chance to speak. And there's a lot of dialogue prompts. And then if people can pass, so everybody has an equal opportunity. And it really opens up awareness and helps people, students become more aware of what other people are going through or feeling or thinking, and also to tune into their own behavior, to have those aha moments. And that helps produce change.
And that was a question asked by Jessica Barbini, was how do you get everybody's voices equally represented? And the talking stick is one example, but the question is, especially when factoring in gender and racial norms, more oppressed groups versus less, do you have any tips for kindly but directly asking some students to listen while letting more quiet children speak? So I'm wondering if you have anything to add to that, Sunny.
We've set time limits before, and we've used the bell to set the time limits too. And so the bell's a gentle reminder. You ring the bell when 60 seconds is up. You can still keep talking and finish your point, but it's a gentle reminder. And soon everybody will sort of get on board with that too. So that's one method that we've used.
Great. Another question that Jack Lang asked was, are there scripts available to help with mindful listening, art and movement? Are those in the resource page? And I know, Sheri, some of the things you were sharing were based on a script or possibly from a script, or maybe you wrote it yourself, but I'm wondering, are those resources available for folks that want to start doing this work?
Well, yeah, you can, for the mindful practices, like the guided breathing practices, you can go through training and learn how to facilitate that, but yeah, anybody can access those. I mean, I often recommend, you can go on YouTube. I mean, I go on YouTube a lot too, and just kind of put in mindful breathing practice, mindfulness for sleep, or whatever my focus, my need is, or desire is. And then I often listen to, there's lots of, it's about picking, there's guided breathing scripts. And so you just listen to them and pull them up. But yeah, you can access them, and they're in the curriculum, a lot of that we provide in the resources. There's a lot of activities in it, in that curriculum. So for example, Goldie Hawn's Mind Up? There's it's like a whole curriculum, and you can get those. And a lot of times they're available. If you go to the websites, you can just get them right off the websites.
Great. And so I want to turn us to our Padlet. You guys shared an incredible amount of resources. There's no way we're going to be able to go over all of them right now, but I do want to let you know that when we share out the archived recording of this presentation, there'll be a link to the Padlet, so you'll be able to visit that Padlet. You have the link right now. It's not going anywhere. You could visit the Padlet at any time and share ideas or find ideas. I want to bring the question to Sheri and Sunny about examples of appropriate mindfulness education for different age children. That was something that was brought up in a lot of the questions that you asked, like the difference of how do you do this with kindergartners? And then how do you do it with teens so that they're receptive of it? And I'm wondering if you have any examples of those two extremes in our K-12 age spectrum.
Well, the curriculum that I'm trained in is designed for, it's an evidence-based curriculum from Mindfulness Without Borders, and it is really, it's more focused on middle school through high school, but its application is fine for any adult. But it's not designed for younger children. There are different elements of the content that can be applied, like the rethink cards. Anybody can use them. Parents can use them at home. Sunny's curriculum is designed for younger kids. And I think, Sunny, did we break it down by age group in our description on the resources?
I'm not sure it's broken down by age group. It's broken down by where you can buy curriculums and then where you can get training and curriculums. At Mindfulness First, we go pre-K through 12th grade, and we have pre-K through 4th, then a middle school, and then a high school curriculum. And then, but I want to share with you all that we partnered with this lovely organization called focusedkids.org. Go to focusedkids.org. They are extremely generous, and you can get all of their preschool curriculum on their website and watch them teaching preschoolers, which I know is probably an age group that people are like, I can't imagine teaching brain science to these little ones. I honestly go and watch it for fun. It's really good. And we've used their methods in our curriculum, and they're just wonderful.
Could you repeat that, and I'll put it in the chat?
Yes. Focusedkids.org.
And again, I want to stress the importance of learning about mindfulness. It's mindfulness-based practices, which are like the guided breathings, all these fun activities, helps build the intention of being mindful, which is a state of being, to really dive in and learn the different aspects of mindfulness and how to apply it in your life and live mindfully. It seems easy, but building that intention is so much more difficult. It really takes a lot of discipline. And so like mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, is really the gold standard of mindfulness training, and they use it in healthcare industry. And that's like, I think it's a 12-week program to go through. My program is an abbreviated version of that. It's more applicable and user-friendly in a different way. It's actually endorsed by Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is the founder of MBSR. Sunny's program, her teacher training is a different model, but they all, a high quality model will incorporate the same aspects of it. Just some people teach it differently, but to be able to practice it and live it and experience it will be helpful in your practice and in working with kids.
Great. So we'll end with one more question, and then we'll close it out. This is the third question on the Padlet about how to provide mindfulness as an outside guest or instructor. And specifically, I also wonder if the class hasn't been practicing mindfulness, what is there value in bringing it, at a once a month frequency or once every, semester frequency? People did share some great ideas. If you are coming in as a guest instructor or less frequent, like build upon what's already happening in the classroom or start with a story. Those are some great ideas that some folks have shared. Be vulnerable yourself, and once again, start with a story or a personal anecdote about yourself to build trust with folks. And then if you are visiting at some sort of frequency, bring a familiar routine each time. But I want to end with Sheri and Sunny about the idea of, if this isn't instilled in a school setting and you're coming in as a guest instructor, what might be the right approach, and is there value in it?
Sunny, do you want to start?
Sure. If you're coming in as a guest instructor, absolutely, we call that seeding a school, and it's which is very appropriate for this group. So it's where the interest starts, because it can't go wrong, right? If you're helping children if you're co-regulating and supporting children through gentle activities around mindfulness, I absolutely recommend you do it, because interest will be sparked throughout the school. We've seen it happen time and time again. So I encourage anyone to seed a school with mindfulness ideas, for sure.
Yeah. And again, these practices, the language, using the pause and to make a better choice as opposed to reacting, and self-managing, judgment, being aware of when you're using judgment and how that can impair decision-making or affect it. But using the language, building it in as part of your culture, your terminology, is helpful in sustainability and capacity building, so to speak, for mindfulness.
All right, and I said we'd close it out, but Gina raised her hand, so we're going to close it out with what Gina has to share if she's there. She just disappeared. Oh, Gina left. So with that, I want to thank you all for spending this hour and 15 minutes with us and learning a little bit more about bringing mindfulness and social emotional learning to your work. Loads of resources shared on the Padlet. There will be a recording of this emailed to you. And thanks again for joining us and making this a part of your work. We'll see you next week, possibly for our next webinar on in-person teaching during COVID. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I want to save the chat.